The sterile silence of the hospital corridor shattered when a newborn's cry echoed, sharp and unexpected. Emily walked in, trembling, her chest tightening as she whispered to herself, "This cannot be real." A nurse hurried past, her shoes squeaking, clutching papers that bore a name Emily hadn't heard in years. Daniel followed behind, his face pale, his eyes darting with disbelief as he muttered, "This must be a mistake." The nurse slowed, her voice low but heavy, announcing, "The test results are conclusive. The child belongs to you." Emily staggered, the ground under her feet tilting, her heart pounding so loudly she thought it might crack her ribs. Daniel clenched his fists, whispering, "No, this isn't my life. It can't be." The walls seemed to close in as memories Emily had buried clawed their way back. A door creaked open, and an older man stepped out, eyes filled with condemnation, whispering, "Blood doesn't lie, Daniel." Emily pressed her palm to her mouth, her breath sharp and broken. The baby's cry grew louder, a sound that pierced deeper than any scream she had ever heard. She whispered, "I don't want this, I can't." But the words felt hollow, because deep down she already knew her world had been torn apart forever. Emily sat in the waiting room, hands clasped tight, her breath shallow. Daniel leaned against the far wall, refusing to meet her eyes. She whispered, "How could this happen?" Daniel muttered, "Don't ask me. I didn't want this." The clock ticked too loudly, each second dragging her deeper into despair. A woman nearby glanced over, her eyes filled with judgment, lips tight with gossip ready to spill. Emily's thoughts spiraled, replaying every betrayal, every secret she had buried. Daniel finally snapped, "Stop looking at me like I did this to you." Emily shook her head, whispering, "We are both trapped." The air grew heavy, suffocating them in silence. Emily closed her eyes, hearing the baby's cry echo through the walls. She whispered, "I swore I'd never face this again." Daniel scoffed, "You think this is about you? My life is ruined." His bitterness stung her like a slap. She said, "That child didn't ask for this." Daniel muttered, "Neither did I." The weight of unspoken truth pressed down between them, suffocating. The walls seemed to echo with memories neither wanted to recall. The nurse reappeared, her voice steady but sharp. "You need to make a decision." Emily whispered, "Decision? I can't even breathe." Daniel shook his head, muttering, "This is not mine to decide." The nurse's gaze cut through them both, unyielding. Emily pressed her hands into her knees, trembling. Daniel turned away, whispering, "I won't carry this weight." Emily's voice broke, "But someone has to." The silence that followed felt like a verdict. Emily finally rose, her knees shaking, as though gravity itself conspired against her. Daniel whispered, "Don't do this." She met his eyes, her voice raw, "I don't have a choice anymore." The hallway stretched endlessly before her, each step dragging like chains. She whispered, "This child changes everything." Daniel slammed his fist against the wall, shouting, "I never wanted this." Emily stopped, tears running down her cheeks, whispering, "Neither did I, but here we are." Emily sat on the edge of the hospital bed, her fingers digging into the sheets, as though they might anchor her to something real. Her voice cracked when she whispered, "I never wanted to come back here." Daniel leaned against the wall, arms crossed tightly, eyes cold. He said, "You talk like you're the only one broken." The nurse stood near the doorway, silent, but her eyes lingered with quiet pity. Emily stared at the floor, the tiles blurring, her chest heavy with old memories of nights she swore she would never relive. Daniel's tone turned sharp. "This isn't about your past. It's about now." She shook her head, tears trembling in her lashes, saying, "Now feels exactly like then." His jaw tightened, but he looked away. The silence spread thick, and every heartbeat felt like a hammer in her chest. The room grew colder as Daniel finally muttered, "I don't owe anyone this burden." Emily's head snapped up, her eyes blazing. She whispered, "Then what do you owe me?" "Nothing?" His lips curled bitterly. "You said it yourself, you never wanted this." Emily's breath caught, her chest heaving as she whispered, "That doesn't mean I can turn away now." Daniel looked at her as if she were a stranger, his words slicing. You can't save yourself. How will you save a child? She pressed a trembling hand to her chest, whispering, because no one saved me. The words hung in the air like shattered glass. Daniel looked away, jaw clenched, unable to answer. Emily stepped into the hallway, her breath ragged, memories swirling like ghosts. She saw flashes of her own childhood. Cold nights, locked doors, whispered lies. She muttered, I swore I would never become them. Daniel followed slowly, his tone harsh. You don't get to rewrite history. She turned, eyes red, whispering, but I can stop it repeating. His voice rose. You think pain makes you strong. It makes you weak. Emily whispered back, trembling. Weak doesn't mean I'll run. The silence between them ached, but the baby's cry echoed faintly down the corridor, binding them both in ways they refused to admit. The older man stepped into their path, his tone filled with steel. He said, You don't deserve this child. Emily froze, breath sharp, whispering, You don't decide that. Daniel muttered under his breath, He's right. The man's gaze cut through Emily, his voice low. This bloodline already carries enough shame. Emily's fists clenched, her voice trembling. Shame is what built us. I won't let it build her. Daniel shook his head, murmuring, You're delusional. Emily's body shook, but her voice rose steady. Delusion is believing silence will save us. The older man looked away, but his silence was answer enough. Emily sank into a chair in the empty lounge, her shoulders slumped. She whispered, I can't keep running. Daniel stood nearby, silent, his eyes unreadable. She pressed her hands together, shaking, muttering, Every time I hear her cry, I hear my own. Daniel turned his face away, his jaw twitching. He said, You think this will fix you? Emily's voice broke, No. But maybe she won't break like I did. He closed his eyes briefly, exhaling. Silence swallowed them both, heavy and unrelenting. Emily whispered into her hands, I am not ready, but I cannot walk away. Emily sat in the family lounge, the whispers of others slicing through her like knives. A group of relatives gathered in the corner, their voices hushed but sharp. One woman muttered, She's not fit to raise a child. Daniel stood by the window, shoulders stiff, refusing to turn. Emily's throat burned as she whispered, Do you hear them? Daniel said coldly, Let them talk. Her chest tightened, anger boiling beneath the fear. She snapped, Their judgment is yours too. He looked over his shoulder, voice low, Don't drag me into your failures. The words landed heavy, and she clenched her fists, whispering, Every scar I carry alone. The air grew suffocating, each glance from strangers, another nail in her coffin. Emily stormed into the hallway, her voice trembling with fury. She shouted, Say it to my face if you dare. A man from the family turned, sneering, You don't deserve her. Daniel followed slowly, muttering, Stop making it worse. Emily's hands shook, her voice raw. You think silence will protect us? It's killing us. The man smirked cruelly. The child deserves better. Her heart pounded as she whispered, Better than me, or better than you. Daniel tugged at her arm, whispering, Walk away. She yanked free, staring the man down, her voice breaking. I will not walk away from her. The hallway crackled with tension as no one dared breathe. Later, in the quiet of a side room, Emily collapsed into a chair, her breath ragged. Daniel muttered, You make everything harder. She looked up at him, eyes burning, whispering, Harder than being abandoned? His jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. She continued, Every time they look at me, I feel like that child again, the one no one wanted. Daniel whispered, And you think raising her will heal that? Emily shook her head, tears spilling. No. But leaving her will destroy me. Silence pressed between them, broken only by the hum of the hospital machines. The older man entered, his voice filled with steel. He said, You think strength is in defiance, but weakness drives you. Emily lifted her head, whispering, Weakness is abandoning her. His eyes narrowed. I've seen generations ruined by lies like yours. Daniel muttered. He's right. Emily's voice shook, but she pushed on. Every lie you kept made me into this. I will not let her carry it. The man's jaw clenched, his silence thick with condemnation. Emily's voice steadied. If pain defines me, then I'll teach her it can be survived. Daniel exhaled sharply, but he didn't argue. The room felt smaller, the tension unbearable. That night, Emily stood outside near the ambulance bay, cold air cutting into her skin. She whispered, "They all want me to give up." Daniel stood beside her, arms folded, muttering, "Maybe they're right." She turned sharply, eyes flashing, whispering, "If I give her away, I give myself away too." His voice cracked, "And if you keep her, you lose everything else." Her breath fogged in the air, her voice steady. "Then let it all burn. She is mine to fight for." Daniel lowered his gaze, silence wrapping him like chains. The night was brutal, but Emily's resolve burned brighter than the coal. The quiet of the hospital archive room felt heavier than the thick dust in the air. Emily clutched the envelope the nurse had slipped her earlier, her fingers trembling. Daniel muttered, "Why did she give you that?" Emily whispered, "Because she knew I had to see it." With shaking hands, she pulled out the folded paper, her eyes scanning lines that made her heart stop. She gasped, "This isn't possible." Daniel's voice sharpened. "What?" She whispered, "The blood doesn't match yours. It matches hers." His eyes widened, confusion etched into his face. The paper slipped from Emily's fingers, floating to the floor like a knife dropping in silence. The older man stepped into the room, his face grim. He said, "You weren't meant to know this." Emily spun toward him, whispering, "You lied to me." His jaw tightened, his silence louder than denial. Daniel shouted, "Tell us the truth." The man's voice cracked. "The child, she is not yours, she belongs to your sister." Emily staggered, her chest collapsing inward. She whispered, "My sister, she's been gone for years." His voice broke, she hid her shame. "I buried it for her." Emily's knees gave way, the world tilting under her. Emily's voice broke as she whispered, "You let me believe it was mine. You let him suffer." Daniel growled, "Why hide this?" The man's eyes filled with regret, his words trembling. "Because shame destroys families. Because truth was worse than silence." Emily shouted, "You destroyed me with silence." Daniel's fists slammed the desk, papers scattering into the air. Emily clutched her stomach, her voice low and broken. "She was my blood all along. And you let me hate myself for nothing." The man whispered, "I thought I was protecting you." Emily glared at him, her tears sharp. "You were protecting yourself." Emily sank against the wall, her voice faint. "All those years I thought I was cursed." Daniel stared at her, his voice softer. "You weren't cursed. You were betrayed." She looked up at him, eyes glassy, whispering, "She was my sister's child. My sister who vanished." Daniel's chest heaved as he muttered, "And he let us burn with lies." The older man looked down, his voice cracking. "She begged me. She said she would die if it came out." Emily's voice grew sharp, "And I died every day instead." The silence fell thick, broken only by Emily's shuddering sobs. Emily rose slowly, her body trembling, but her voice steady. She whispered, "The truth cannot stay buried anymore." Daniel nodded, his voice low. "Then we fight with it, not against it." The older man's shoulders slumped, his words weak, "You'll ruin everything." Emily's eyes hardened. "Everything was ruined the moment you lied." The baby's faint cry carried down the hall, a sound that sealed her resolve. Emily's voice broke, but she whispered, "She deserves to know where she came from, even if it destroys me." Daniel placed a hand on her arm, his face torn between fear and loyalty. The room seemed to vibrate with the weight of unspoken vows. The courtroom felt like a cage of judgment, every whisper cutting through Emily's skin. She walked forward, her knees unsteady but her gaze refusing to falter. Daniel followed a few steps behind, his face unreadable, but his fists clenched so tightly, the knuckles were pale. The older man sat in the first row, eyes narrowed, shoulders rigid, his disapproval radiating like poison. The judge struck the gavel demanding silence, but the tension remained thick. Emily whispered under her breath, "This ends here." Daniel leaned closer, muttering with bitter resolve, "Or it begins here." The baby's muffled cry from the adjoining chamber floated into the room, haunting everyone with its fragile truth. Emily felt her chest tighten, every scar on her soul tearing open as she whispered, "She is not shame. She is not a curse. She is the truth they tried to bury." The judge's gaze fell upon her, heavy and expectant, but Emily stood taller. For the first time she did not shrink from their eyes. She burned beneath them. The older man rose suddenly, his chair scraping the floor, his voice booming. "This child does not belong to her." Emily spun toward him, her voice sharp, breaking through the air like glass. "She belongs to no lie anymore." Daniel stood still, torn between stepping forward or staying silent, his jaw trembling. The judge leaned closer, his eyes narrowing, asking, "Whose truth must this court accept?" Emily's chest heaved as she shouted, her voice ragged but clear, "Mine, because I have lived in the ruins of your silence." The older man thundered back, "Your sister begged me to hide her shame." Emily's voice cracked as tears spilled, "And I bled for her shame. Every day you forced me into silence." The gallery gasped, whispers spilling like fire across the benches. Daniel finally erupted, his fists slamming against the table, shouting, "Enough lies!" The judge's gavel struck down hard, but the truth was already louder than order. Emily lifted her chin, trembling but unbroken, and the room felt the shift. Emily gripped the wooden table until her fingers ached, her legs threatening to give way. She whispered through choked breaths, "I was never meant to know. But I do, and I will not bury her like you buried me." Daniel slammed his fist again, his roar filling the chamber. "This child is not a crime." The older man hissed from across the aisle, "She will ruin everything you touch." Emily's vision blurred with tears as she whispered, "She already saved me from the nothing I had become." Her voice trembled but did not break. The judge struck the gavel, the sound reverberating like thunder against the walls. Emily's chest rose and fell violently as she raised her voice, trembling with fury. "I am her blood. I am her shield, and no one will silence me again." Daniel placed his calloused hand gently over hers, his face torn between anger and tenderness, as if silently vowing to stand beside her. Even the silence that followed felt alive with fire. The gallery erupted into chaos, voices clashing, but Emily's cry rose above them, raw and untamed. "I will not lose her." Daniel's voice roared like thunder beside her, "No one will take her from us." The older man's face twisted with fury, his words venomous, "She will never be yours." Emily stepped forward, tears cutting down her cheeks, her voice cracking like a whip. "She was mine the moment her cry reached me. She was mine because I answered when no one else would." Daniel's chest heaved, sweat shining on his brow, whispering fiercely, "Then she is ours to protect." The older man staggered back a step, his authority cracking under the weight of their defiance. The judge slammed his gavel furiously, shouting for order, but the truth surged louder than law. Emily's sob turned to a scream of resolve, her voice echoing, "She is not your silence. She is my redemption." The gallery fell into breathless shock. Then came the silence, heavy and absolute. Emily's body shook as she whispered into the stillness, "She is the only truth I have left." Daniel turned toward her, his eyes softening, whispering, "And that truth is enough." The older man slumped in his chair, his voice breaking, "You'll regret this. You'll regret it when the weight crushes you." Emily shook her head slowly, her tears glimmering in the light, whispering, "The only weight I carry is your lies, and I lay them down now." The judge sighed, his voice solemn but final, "The child remains in her care." The gavel struck once more, but this time it didn't sound like judgment, it rang like release. Emily's knees weakened, but she straightened herself, whispering, "Then I will not fail her." Daniel placed his arm around her, and though he said nothing more, his silence was not abandonment, but promise. The storm had broken, leaving behind scars, but also freedom. Emily sat in the hospital nursery, her hands pressed against the glass as the baby stirred softly. Daniel stood behind her, his reflection heavy in the glass. He whispered, "You got what you wanted." Emily's voice shook. "No, I got what she deserved." Daniel sighed, leaning closer. "And what about us?" Emily closed her eyes, whispering, "We were gone long before this." The silence stretched as the child's small chest rose and fell, steady, innocent. Emily's tears slid down, her voice faint. "She is all that matters now." Emily sat alone in the chapel, dim candles flickering against the cold stone walls. Her voice cracked in prayer. "I don't ask for forgiveness, just strength." Daniel entered quietly, his footsteps echoing. He said, "I didn't come to argue." She whispered, "Then why come at all?" He sat beside her, his voice low, "Because I still don't know if I can walk away." Emily turned, eyes swollen, whispering, "Then stay, not for me, but for her." Daniel dropped his gaze, whispering, "She deserves better than both of us." The older man stood outside under the cold night sky, leaning on his cane. Emily approached, her voice sharp. "Do you feel proud of what you did?" His face crumpled, whispering, "I thought I was sparing you." Emily's voice trembled. "You condemned me." He muttered, "I wanted to protect this family." Her voice rose. "Family? You tore it apart." He turned away, whispering, "I lost her too, you know." Emily's hands shook, tears falling. "You lost me the moment you chose silence." His silence now was heavier than any words. Daniel sat in the lounge, staring at his hands as though answers might appear there. Emily entered quietly, whispering, "You don't have to stay." He looked up, voice breaking, "I don't know who I am without her." Emily's heart twisted, whispering, "Then find out with her." He shook his head, whispering, "What if I fail?" She knelt in front of him, gripping his hands, whispering, "Then we fail together." But she won't. His eyes brimmed with tears as silence settled heavy between them, fragile but alive. Emily stood by the window of the recovery room, holding the baby close to her chest. Daniel stood beside her, his hand resting gently on the child's blanket. Emily whispered, "She doesn't know the weight she carries." Daniel murmured, "And she never should." Emily closed her eyes, whispering, "We will give her more than silence." He nodded, whispering, "Then we fight, even if it breaks us." The baby stirred softly, and Emily whispered, "Let her only remember love." The sunrise bled slowly through the glass, painting them all in fragile hope. Emily sat alone in the quiet recovery room, the baby asleep in her arms. She whispered, "Your cry saved me, even when I wanted silence." Daniel entered quietly, his voice low, "You look like you finally belong." Emily's eyes filled, whispering, "I don't know if I do, but she deserves someone who will never leave." Daniel stood still, torn, whispering, "Maybe that can be me too." Emily lowered her head, whispering, "Then prove it." "Not to me, but to her." The silence hummed like a vow neither could break. The older man sat in the chapel, head bowed, hands clasped tight. Emily entered, her voice cold but breaking. "I hope silence feels holy to you." He whispered, "I lost everything trying to protect what was already broken." Emily's eyes hardened. "You didn't lose me, you threw me away." He whispered, "I thought love meant hiding shame." Emily's voice shook. "Love means standing beside it." He lowered his gaze, unable to respond. Emily turned away, whispering, "I will never forgive the silence." Daniel stood outside the hospital, leaning against the wall, cigarette trembling in his hand though unlit. Emily approached, holding the baby close, whispering, "You don't have to stay." He looked at her, eyes wet, whispering, "And if I want to?" She whispered, "Then stay for her, not for me." He nodded slowly, whispering, "Maybe that's the only reason worth staying." Emily's face softened, whispering, "Then don't let her cry alone." Daniel dropped the cigarette, crushing it beneath his boot, his silence the only answer she needed. Emily walked slowly down the corridor, the baby pressed against her chest, each step echoing like thunder. Nurses passed by, their eyes soft but wary. Daniel followed close behind, silent but steady. Emily whispered to herself, "Every scar led me here." Daniel murmured, "And every scar made you strong." Emily whispered back, "No, every scar made me human." The baby stirred gently, her small cry filling the hall. Emily's lips trembled, whispering, "And I will not let her carry mine." The corridor stretched endlessly, but this time she kept walking forward. Outside, the morning sun bled into the sky, painting everything in fragile light. Emily stood still, cradling the baby, her voice trembling. "I never wanted to be a mother, until she called me Mama." Daniel stood beside her, whispering, "Then you'll never walk alone again." Emily looked at him, tears catching the sunrise, whispering, "Even if you leave, she will always know me." The wind carried the child's soft whimper, and Emily kissed her forehead, whispering, "This is where it begins." The silence that followed pressed into the heart like a final, unforgettable vow.